thoughts on the Honda CR-V. This one in particular is a model year 2011 four-wheel drive. Now the four-wheel drive is very handy if you live in a place that sees inclement weather with some frequency. You won't lose a step. 23 miles per gallon, pretty good for a SUV. It uses the lowest cost gas, 87. And that's good for two reasons. One was cheaper, and two, there are some stretches if you drive through, mainly I think if I recall correctly from the middle of Texas to somewhere in Arizona, where the gas stations are very infrequent, and some of those gas stations do not carry anything above 87. In fact, they carry 86 and 87. Those are your choices. So if you get a SUV or any car for that matter that requires high octane, you have to get gas, then I guess you have no choice but to use the 87, but that's going to mess with your emission system. And while you may be tempted to get the octane booster, that stuff doesn't work, so save your money. It will also, not only does it work, it will also mess with your with your emission system. So, moving forward, it weighs about 3,500 pounds, give or take some depending on trim. 180 horse. Those last two numbers are pretty favorable until you actually get in the car and experience the acceleration or lack thereof. And that is, to me, is a very detrimental feature. It does not accelerate well. And once you get up to speed, highway speed, it's fine. It's steady, it's stable, it's not shaking or vibrating or giving you any sort of indication or bad feeling that the car may break down. And we're talking about a good, healthy highway speed, but responsible, of course, 80, 90 miles an hour. Good visibility all the way around, which is important. You can get, obviously, a bigger SUV that will haul bigger items, more items. But then you're talking about a bulkier, heavier vehicle. And if you're in a metropolitan area, like I am, and you've got a lot of traffic, parking is tight, oftentimes you have to deal with parking garages. I don't like the big, bulky vehicles. This is actually a good size for a metropolitan area. A couple of the features that it has, pretty basic on the interior, which I like. I don't like a lot of fluff because there's more things that are going to go wrong. Mainly the